Welcome, Brett. Thanks for coming on the channel today.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is awesome. This is awesome. So let's just jump in before we get into the nitty gritty, right? Let's just talk about who you are, get to know you a little bit. Yeah, so tell us about yourself. Who are you? What do you enjoy doing? Aside from boots and stuff, I'm sure you have a whole life outside of that.
Yeah, not much. So I'm Brett Viberg, third generation of Viberg boot. Um, yeah, so let me think here about me. So I mean, I've been in the industry for, I guess, most of my life, but really full time, probably um, like say 13, 14 years in terms of directionally taking it. Um, And then hobby stuff, I used to play a lot of sports, a lot of ice hockey. Um, just now it's just like fitness and trying to just unwind on the weekend. So it's really, do a lot of reading and a lot of really simple stuff that just doesn't involve making decisions or having somewhat of a responsibility. So there's nothing too exciting. I mean, it used to be that way, and it used to be, we'd go on a trip, or I would go on a trip, and you could let loose all the time. But structurally, I wasn't at the top now that I am, and so it totally changes everything. So, um, but yeah, I mean, basically that's it. It's a pretty normal life. I mean, it was, movies and all sorts of stuff like this, but obviously with COVID it's changed everything. So it's been a good year because it's brought uh my me and my wife's relationships great, a lot of time together. um and then also just having time to kind of rebuild the house and kind of reorganize the areas where uh I want to fix it. I mean, it really, my life is around my work, and just the creative side of it, just the ability to express what I want to do and have kind of the full freedom to do it. It's that's is the lifestyle, I guess. So it's not like I don't need another outlet for it, at least right now. Um, and you know, up until last January, I wasn't living in the same city as the factory, so I'd been remote, going back and forth from Vancouver to Victoria, probably every week by seaplane. Um, and then since moving here, it's just been like super intense. I thought I was busy before, and now that I'm here, it's just uh, constantly turning the rocks over and trying to just make things better or make things the way that I want them and this kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, for actual downtime, I mean, we used to go on vacation and go to the beach and just completely relax and unwind and take your mind off of any sort of responsibilities. But obviously that's not the case right now. So
Mm.
um, I think everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's needing a time out from all this stuff, but we can't. So
Oh yeah.
yeah.
The time at home has definitely been a treasure for a lot of people. So I can
Yeah.
resonate with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are, they either love it or they hate it, and they just want, but it's just, it's a time to reflect, and you can either choose it for the positive or the negative. So, you know,
So normally I would ask, you know, what's your favorite pair of footwear that you make? But you mentioned your wife. What is your wife's favorite pair of footwear? Or does she have
probably
one?
not ours.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, she's French, so it's probably some French brand, luxury stuff, uh, heels. She works for government. Um, yeah, I mean, I've made her shoes. She's got a pair of Chelsea's. I made her some running shoes, and I just made her a pair of hiking boots that have like a super super fat sole on it. But it's different with women because it's they style for outfit, and they need many types of things for many types of outfits, and so it's either somebody that has a huge disposable income that can buy luxury product, high end product for those same channels, or you have fast fashion, and that's kind of, so it's, like literally I could probably be making her something every week, and like I would never, it would just always change. Oh, I like this and this color, and then this and this and this and this, and she might wear it, very few times, but it'll make the outfit for those few times,
Right. Yeah, no, I
So
can relate with my own wife. I'm like, well, my
yeah,
boots are great because they last like 20 years. And she's like, why would I want my shoes to last 20 years?
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So,
So
so
yeah.
talking about your personal style, just to have a little bit of fun. So I noticed in all your pictures, dating back 15, 20 years, you're usually not shaven and you usually have a hat on. Have you
Yeah.
ever found without a hat and shaven? If I
Uh,
dress up as you for a Halloween, I don't want to get it wrong. I don't want to be mistaken for
yeah,
Glenn.
yeah, I know. Yeah. Um, I, I don't know. I mean, I've always worn a cap. I don't know why, but and then now it's just like fully buzzed, And so as I'm getting older, you know, getting older and losing the hair, But yeah, it's just I, I my style is just like a uniform. It's like t-shirt, jeans, or if it's not jeans, it's some sort of pant, and could be boot, shoe, Birkenstock. Um, but the uniform is pretty basic. I love fashion, but it's also not my style. But I appreciate somebody that has the the ability and the not to be so self-aware to basically dress up how they want, and that's just not me. Fuck, I wish I could. I look at stuff like that, and uh, yeah, I'm like, it was to a point where I'd buy stuff knowing that I could wear it in a different city, and I ended up with all these clothes that I'm like, oh well, this is a bit not me, but I could get away with wearing this somewhere else because it's a lot, like European. It's a lot more fashion forward or whatever the mindset was. And now I'm just like, fuck, I don't care. I'll
Yeah.
just give me a white T-shirt, give me 10 of them, and that'll get me through the week, and I'll wash them again. And it's pretty simple that way.
Nice. So all the all the Brett Viberg charlatans out there be like, bro, get a hat.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not easy to find a good hat, man. I tell you, you think it'd be simple, but we get some made in Vancouver. I think that they're one of the only companies in Canada making caps, and um, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, any sort of manufacturing is a struggle. So, but yeah,
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Like whether it's, footwear, t-shirts, hats, it might look really simple, but every head is different, every set of feet are different, every person's torso is different. And yeah, it could be tough finding exactly what you want, even if it's just like you said, like a plain t-shirt. There's a lot of shopping
oh
to
man, it's ridiculous. A
yeah.
t-shirt. I mean, everybody has their own idea of the fit, and it's just like, oh my god, man. So it's that's the thing, is that you look at just a shoe last, and it's not, the goal is not to make it for everybody. And some people can wear it, some people will wear it even if it doesn't fit properly, just because they want to be a part of this idea. But at the end of the day, it's just, you need to find out how, you need to find a brand and a fit that works with your body, and hopefully it's something that allows you to if you want to be fashionable, for a lack of better words, hopefully it does that as well. So, but for the most part, when you look at American fashion, it's workwear based, and the cuts are very utilitarian, and it's fairly simple. The construction's simple. There's nothing sophisticated about it in the most, in the larger sense. Um, so it's just about wear, repair, and kind of longevity. So
Taking it further with where you come in at Viberg, let's go back in time a little bit. So you're obviously a creative mind. That's like your main deal is designing and all that, being creative.
I guess so. Yeah. Yeah.
So what were maybe some interests or influences on you in your younger years, or pastimes you had that maybe have played into you being the creative you are these days?
Um, I mean, I there's obviously like a sense of fashion. You know, when I was in like junior high school, I was huge into like polo Ralph Lauren, but like polo shirt Ralph Lauren, like not like streetwear, you know. Um, and then as I got into high school and I was working at the factory, we Aldo shoes were huge, like massive. I mean, it's still huge, but it was like, you know, if you go back pre-internet and you keep going back, in Canada at least, there's like hardly any variety other than going down to like the US, going to a huge mall and having access to things that you never could get in Canada. And so you had these few chains or larger brands that were Canadian. And so Aldo was one of them. And we used to wear, or I used to wear that, and it was huge among my friends. And then in like grade 11, I just kind of figured I could make it. I couldn't find what I wanted, so I just decided to make it. And all it was a Chelsea boot. And at the time, we had our Chelsea was, well, we call it a, what do we call it? A Romeo. So it was a Romeo. That's the word. And so it wasn't a whole cut pattern, and I wanted to be one piece. So I just kind of joined these paper patterns together, and I traced it out, and I had somebody put it together for me and put a fat sole on it. So it essentially looked like an Aldo shoe, right? Um, the problem is that back then everything was workwear, total workwear, so it weighed a ton. But you know, I wore it all the time. I wore it. I actually tried to find it. I think I might have it at my parents' someplace. But so it's more just out of necessity that I had access to trying to make something. I guess that was the idea. So that, but you know, there wasn't much of a huge interest in fashion or creativity in that matter. Yeah. So it really the biggest learning curve kind of came from when I started to get involved, say in 2006. Very, you know, I worked in the factory right out of high school, and then I wanted to do something. I moved to Vancouver. I tried to get into acting, which is just like a shit show, and clearly it didn't work out because now I'm doing shoes. So, but it the light bulb went off when I was acting, because I thought that it was the only thing that I could ever do to give me this creative outlet. And the truth is, you can get this creative outlet exists at Starbucks, and it exists everywhere. And it just is your perception on life. And so the light bulb kind of went off, and I was like, oh, you know, if I can get some sort of creative control in this idea. And at that time, you know, free and easy was huge, and we started to do all these like glorified work boots in Japan and in red and all this kind of crap. And so we started to go to Japan probably 2006, 2007, and I understood the idea of how they viewed product, how they viewed small brands, how they looked and searched the world for these niche opportunities for them to bring back, the marketing behind it, not necessarily from a design level, because they weren't really doing anything innovative. It was just rather making a really Americana product for that market, right? So after that, I kind of switched gears, got more involved in what it is like as of today. And so so I was working and doing a bunch of stuff in Japan, and you know, trying to build up this market. And then I started to develop like the service boot, and then the 310 last came first, and then the 2030 came second. But all of those ideas did not do anything in Japan. They're a total bust. And so basically, because I was too late, the market in Japan already had the idea that Viberg was a short shift, or was a 145 or a 245. And so when I tried to do my own thing with it and tried to make something that I would wear or you would wear, it didn't work. And we got a bit of play. The Scout boot was done around the same time. And anyways, fast forward, I met Nigel Caborn, and he's, you know, I don't know if you ever met him, but he's very, very kind. very generous. And this is probably back in 2010, 2011, maybe even earlier, maybe 2009. I met him in Vancouver at Inventory when Inventory magazine was around, and he invited me to come to show on his stand in Berlin, and kind of basically, like, he became a fan of the product and the story, and vice versa. And so he really got me in front of a lot of stores, and was an amazing promoter for me, and supporter, and also just educator on design and how he approached everything. Just understanding something that I didn't know anything about, which is fashion. And even to this day, it's, we're manufacturer first. So to think like a fashion brand is it's very difficult to get a lot of people all going in the same direction. And it's something that we still struggle with today. So, yeah, I don't know. Don't know if that answers much. So,
Yeah, so let's delve into the 2030 a little bit. Obviously, that's got quite a history. So
yeah.
at the time, in your mind, why did the world need the 2030? Like, what caused you to set out to redesign this archive last?
Well, so what happened is that I was looking at, so at the time I was doing stuff in Berlin. I had the 310 last, we had the 110 last. We didn't have a more formal shape that could allow a lower heel. It just didn't exist. Nobody that made a stitch down product in 2009, 2008 made one. It did not exist in the market. It wasn't there. Even now, like, the people that do it are brand new for the most part. So the point was that I was getting away from my own workwear endeavors, and I was like, fuck, I want to wear just, like 316. I want to wear normal denim. Yeah, I want to wear slim denim, but I don't want to wear this fucking gigantic clunky thing on my foot. What the hell can I do? So then just digging at archives, looking at what other brands held as manufacturers, and basically getting vintage Canadian last. And then we basically, as soon as we got it, we modified it so that it worked better for stitch down, because it mainly was for weld. And slowly just tweaking on this last. And essentially that kind of revolutionized, I guess, what we were doing, because at the time when I was doing this, I was looking at like Guidi, and I was looking at other fashion brands that were like pancaked in the toe, And so like in 2008 and 2009, there was not one company that was doing a stitch down product that was just pancaked, unless it was like Clark's, that was totally not that product. It was just like, it's a desert boot, total function, like, it's similar to like a Blundstone type of product. So that's kind of how it all evolved. And then it just kind of caught on, because at that time, where we were, Naked and Famous was huge, and they were constantly doing a lot of good things, and they still are. And that product could fit in with any of these really fitted, nudie denim and all this kind of crap, right? So it fit in perfectly at the time. And so I think it was just the right place at the right time. And ultimately nobody had offered it before. And I think that's ultimately it, and then you add that in with our like overkill construction and heavy leather, and it's like, holy fuck, this thing is sleek, but yet it's like bulletproof. Oh man, I want it, because it goes good with, 21 ounce denim, and like, holy shit, like this is the marriage I've been looking for, and that's kind of, it exists today, right? It's something that people want. And so, that's why it's still one of the most popular things that we make. And yeah, I mean, it's as simple as that, I guess. I don't know what else to add to it.
Yeah, so are most of your last historical archive lasts that you kind of modify, or are there any of them that you really just kind of created from scratch?
Yeah, some of them I tried to create from scratch, and it's so much work. Or I'll take a blank from, I'll get somebody I'll take a Bondo, I'll put it in a vintage shoe, I'll pull it out, and then I'll just start from there. and then I'll just sand it down or whatever, and then I'll send it off to the last maker, either in the US or wherever. It doesn't really matter. Get them to make a first model from that, and then constantly tweak it. But I mean, I probably have like right now in the factory, and I have like 2 or 3 bins of just sample lasts, and it's just like, it's fucking bonkers. Like half the shit I'll never use. I just wanted to try it. I've got stuff where I was trying to take a 310 last and see how extreme I can make this sprung toe, and it's just like the iterations of this thing, it's just stupid, and yeah, so it's just stuff like that. It's just trial and error, and a lot of it is failure. I mean, a lot of the stuff we do doesn't work, and we'll make a sample, we'll sell the sample, the idea of it, we'll put it to production, and it doesn't work. It's a total failure, total bust. And so you lose all that leather, you lose all that time, but you learn stuff as well. So
you mentioned 310. Okay, so something like this, you just said there was a bunch of iterations.
Yeah.
Use the 310 as an example. You're approaching an archive last. What's going through your mind? What are you imagining for it?
So that right there is a so back in like so I got looking at vintage last because of Julian, and back in like, oh man, we're talking a long time ago. So I think the 310, I officially came out with the 310 in like 2007. So I'm talking like early when I got involved. We were doing stuff. We sampled out for Double RL. Julian was involved. I think Westco did stuff. They were looking for American manufacturer or Canadian to make their, what is now the Double RL footwear line, right? And which now that's Julian's kind of claim to fame. And he did a great job with it. So at that time, he was using a last maker in England called Springline, and they have archives of, like, it's British. They're the last British manufacturer of lasts in Northampton, and their archive of stuff is phenomenal. So I was looking at their stuff. We did some stuff with Double RL and kind of, so I got a hold of just a sprung toe last. It was for I'd like an ammo boot or something like this. So that takes care of the sprung toe. And then Dayton boot had a tough, they call it a toughy toe, or what, I don't even know what it's called. All it is a work boot, not with a sprung toe, just a normal, like our 160, but it had a bump toe, right? So I took the bump toe and I stuck it on the sprung toe, and now it's the 310. And so I took those two last, I sent it to Julian, I sent a bunch of sketches down, and he had a guy down in LA mock me up. I think I still have the first ever rendition of the 310, and it was like, ended up being like a 4E. It's like a fucking monster. But so from that, then it's just scaling it back, changing some of the fit on it. I think we have a D width and an E width in it, and playing with the pitch of the actual bump toe on it. The issue is that it's more aggressive. The bump in the toe is more aggressive than what Dayton has. And with the sprung toe, it is very hard to last certain leathers with it. So the issue is that you can't do cordovan, and it's very, very hard to do horse butt. Anything that has a shell does not mold around, because the toe goes up and then it kind of peaks, and there's like a little hook. So to get the leather to sit and last properly is like, it's almost impossible. And that's really why nobody, there's not many people doing this type of look, and maybe because it's unique and not everybody wants it. But yeah, also it's extremely difficult to kind of work with. So
when you design something like this, so with this one in particular, or any other last that you make, are you usually thinking, I have this idea in my mind and I want to achieve that? Or with something like this, was it more like exploratory surgery where you're like, well, let's just start doing stuff and see what we can find? We just want something chunky.
I don't think I'm ever worried about if it sells or not. So, it's like, I made that because I thought it would look cool. So I was like, okay, well, let's make this. And I used to, that's what all I wore was, I had a 310 last, and I had a service boot that had 5 eyelets that was it goes almost, it's like 3/4 of the way up, right? There's a few models that are like this that we made way back. So I wore these things and I put a half sole on it, but what I had a lower heel on it because one of the things that I didn't ever like about the 310 was the heel is a proper work boot heel. It's high. So when I tried to remake this 310 with more sprung, I lowered the heel and I flattened out the toe, but it's totally off balance, the shoe. I mean, it's anyways, yeah. So, but yeah, ultimately it's just, fortunately I've come up with enough good ideas, I guess, for lack of better words, that people have appreciated enough to buy, that support most of the company, that will allow me to then fuck around and just throw stuff at the wall, ultimately, And so without that, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing. And, but essentially it's most of the stuff that is relevant today is stuff that I was doing 10 or 12 years ago, so the stuff I'm actually working on today may never work, but I am still needing to kind of keep my brain going. Otherwise I just am not interested. I couldn't, to be more efficient, we would only make service boots and we could probably sell them all, but I just have no interest in having a company like that. It just doesn't interest me at all. So the 145, there's actually, it's not just the 145. There's a series of like a bunch of styles that are just kind of kiboshing for the time being. And it's not that I'm getting rid of anything. It's just I'm getting rid of it on a custom level at wholesale. So if I make a collection for us and for everybody, then it could include anything. And that way it's under my guidance and supervision of what the idea is and what it's supposed to be, right? And so the problem is that we have 145, 245, Bobcat, short shifts, all these things that predate my involvement, and they're not up to my standards at all. And I'm trying to elevate our process and everything else. And at the same time, we're making stuff that's totally going in the other direction. And it's very hard to say, let's actually make something beautiful. And then let's make this thing that is the little ugly duckling. And so that's kind of the thought process to it. I don't need it. And that the problem is that as a company as a whole, I would like to have some sort of restriction on not being looked at as a novelty brand and producing random small one-offs of things that are not cohesive to the idea of what I'm trying to do for the company and where I think the growth is. And I also know where the core customer is, but I know that we offer products that a lot of different people could probably buy, but there's not much that will change my mind to want to offer that anymore. And so I need some sort of clean slate to be able to kind of put everything in order. Then once I have it in order and I have the proper structure that I'm trying to, maybe not the proper structure, but the proper message, then maybe at that point I can open things back up and it will change the perception of the brand. And, because there was a time when all this stuff would not sell. Like you literally could not sell it. I sold some through Europe, and then nobody in North America wanted this stuff. Like inventory bought some, and then it got to the Scout boot with a wedge sole, but nobody wanted 145. I mean, nobody got it, right? And stuff that we were doing like 12 years ago, people kind of now want, or they've seen it enough and they feel confident enough to wear it, and it complements their style because it's chunky and it's rugged. But other people do it. I mean, I think Oak Street does one. Looks basically the same but welted. Whites does it. Hawthorne Whites does it. It might not be my last in our leathers, but like it's basically the same thing. It's going to serve the same purpose. And if I can if I can take those out of my factory and make something new or open up room to do something that I'm more interested in, and maybe it might catch on, then I think that's a better choice of that small space, because it's not like we're making thousands of these things. It's so small that it's almost irrelevant at this point. And so it's really just looking at how can I best serve use of our space and our time, and also make everything that we produce sort of reflect the same values. And you know, I would rather be known only as a service boot brand than to be known as a 145 brand. You know, and so yeah, it's, and you know, obviously people will, you know, everybody's has an opinion, but I think it's, you know, we're so micro and so non-relevant in footwear. It's just like, you know, you see these large companies and like we're not even comparable. It's just, it's mind-boggling, you know, like to think that most big companies would produce in less than a month, or probably in weeks, they will produce our entire year capacity, right? Like people do not fathom how small and how unique, even a brown Chrome XL service boot, we're making like, I doubt we make 150 a year, you know, of just that one thing. I mean, it's so limited, right? Yet they want more limited to the fact that it's like one of 15. And I don't think they understand really what they're getting. In comparison to what reality is, they're just used to this idea. Like you don't buy a pair of 316 jeans and think that there's 15 pair. The factory would be like, fuck you, we're not making 15, we need to make 1500, right? So why is it any different with footwear? Footwear is way more complicated to make than clothing any day of the week. You would never get into making footwear. The last and the leather, and I mean, fuck, you have to be mad to try to make shoes. It's just such a bad investment, you know. So, and I'm not. So, anyways, I'm not trying to limit what we're doing. I'm just trying to limit the offering for now. And if and when it opens back up, can I make it better? Like, how can this be better? How can I give them better value instead of making this thing that it serves a function, but how can I serve that function but make it, you know, make it just more beautiful, more finished, you know, better detail. And right now, the way it is, it just doesn't serve that purpose. It serves one purpose, which is mainly just function. I mean, it's clunky and it's big and it will last a lifetime, but it doesn't mean that it's aesthetically pleasing. You know, it's complementary, which makes it novelty.
So
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I could summarize what you're saying, if and when it comes back, it'll be better, and you'll probably offer it on the .com as a part of your collection.
Well, it doesn't mean to be .com. I'm just saying it needs to be part of a collection that you can buy into, the store can buy into. So there's a point of view, right? So put it this way. So if you think of any brand, it doesn't need to be us. And you have a store and you have access to make shoes that are basically window dressing. You have a small minimum and you're only going to order it maybe once or twice a year. And obviously if it sells, you'll order more, but you're not invested into that idea. You're just wanting something that has shock value, that is unique, and you can create a story about it. But it doesn't serve the brand that you're buying from. It serves your only you, right? Like, yeah, you're giving them money and you're paying them for the product and there's a bit of profit there, but it's self-serving. It's not a group effort, right? And I guess that's like, it's a very complicated business model in footwear, because Trickers does it, Alden does it. People do it with more limitations than us, but they still do it. And why is that? Because no other type of business does that, right? And that's a huge conversation to have on a massive scale in menswear, right? Unless it's a single hand maker making one pair of jeans at a time. But you know, you're going to pay probably $500 or $600 for that pair of jeans, but you don't want to pay $2,000 or $3,000 for the pair of shoes. You think it still should be the same price as the other ones. So it's, you know, and at the end of the day, we're so small that it's irrelevant. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. It's like, I'm not really changing the needle very much. I'm just trying to make better product and make it, in my mind, better value for how I think that Viberg should be. You know, there's a difference between opening up this beautiful box with the dust bags and the creams and all this stuff, and it's a Cordovan boot that's got binding or whatever it is, and then you open it up and it's like a 145 with raw edges and this clunky sole, and it's a totally it just doesn't fit the mold, you know.
He like seems like super passionate about this. Is there anything that like at the current time you're just like really feeling or like, you know?
Not really. I mean, I like I said, I'm getting older, and I'm, you know, it's just what is it that I need as a grown up, and you know, how do I, if I want to be elevated, or if I want to wear different things, what are those products that I currently don't make, you know? And you know, and I only have room for so many things. I can't. We're limited on capacity. So if I want to if I want to develop new things, I want to open up the door, and I'm going to set the cap to say 20 styles or 15 styles. That means some styles have to go, right?
Right.
And so otherwise, you know, I would just open it up even more, and I'd say, oh, we're going to add in all of my work boot styles, all of our Western styles. We're going to have 50 different things we offer. And of those, we're going to make even, you know, more one-offs that you don't really have an identity for the brand. Right. And I think that's, you know, that's one thing that you need to have, is what is the identity? And, you know, you know, you're asking me things about legacy and stuff. And to me, it's really having a point of view with product and with why you're doing it, and trying to resonate all those things. And I think it's very hard to be truthful to your customer base if you're making so much custom product that actually is not truthful to the brand. Rather, it's truthful to the store that is selling the brand. So to put it in a nutshell, it's basically trying to clean up things that predate my involvement is essentially all I'm trying to do. And then if it's going to be something that is done by me for this idea, it will be a different version of it. Hmm. So, and you know, the Scout boot forward, basically, Scout boot was about the same time as a service boot, and that's all the new generation, if you're going to say something, right? So that type of stuff. So, yeah.
Nice. Okay, so you're kind of making it more focused, all your energies and all, you know, what you guys are putting out, and styles and everything. That's good. Thanks for
trying to. I mean, within reason. I mean, it's not like we're not doing stuff. I mean, you know, the wholesale business is a huge part of our business, and it's growing. And I'm not trying to change that. I'm just trying to find the balance within the process of what we're doing manufacture wise. And, you know, it happens, you know, almost every other week stuff goes through, we make it and it's made wrong because something was custom. Either they wanted a different color tongue or they wanted something else. And there's no reason for that. They don't need the different color tongue. It gives them a bit of leverage to sell the product and make it unique for their store, and gives them a different spin on the product. But in doing so, just that one element, from the point of cutting and pulling the leather to putting it together, I mean, the chances of a mistake specifically with that is not that high, but it can happen, right? And if you times that by pretty much every single store orders in that respect, and they also order a bit of seasonal and a bit of like classic core, you know, stitch down service boot, Chrome XL, I mean, you're bound to have a lot of stuff that is not correct.
Right. I didn't even think of that. Like a lot of the core models, the Chrome XL ones, they're like either identical or maybe almost identical, and there might be one or two things different, and you're sending them to like different stores. So that, you know, possibility for error is probably quite considerable, right? When it's like, this one's a plain toe color 8 and the other one is 2, but they have 2 different color eyelets.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, the eyelets is different because you can pop them out. If it's thread or if it's like the edging or something, I mean, within reason, you can probably fix it. It's if it's the issue is that if they go, oh, I wanted a straight toe cap, no brogue, and I got brogue or didn't get any, it's like those are the things that you can't fix, especially once it's made, right? So, or it's wanted a pull tab and it didn't get a pull tab, or stuff like that. So it's yeah, I mean, if it's so close to what we basically have as like a standardized product, uh, and the thing is, standardized product is still low volume. I mean, it's nothing. If we made 200 of something in a year, I mean, when you actually break down how, like, I don't even know what the percentages of the people that buy Viberg, what is 200 pair of that thing? It's not money. It's like 2 or 3% maybe. I mean, it's not many,
Right.
so it's still unique. Yeah. So I guess really when we're talking about, you're asking me before about product development and the changes that I'm making, and I guess I should bring this up, is that when I look at North American product in general of a brand and manufacturer, and you take something out of France or Italy or England, and you look at North America in general, it's very workwear driven, and it's not necessarily about the craftsman and the like artisanal and this idea of beauty and craft. It's about rugged, strong, heavy, longevity. And for me, because we grew up in that field and we own that field, that's what we do. I'm trying to then change the narrative about how people perceive the product, and if I'm trying to make elevated ideas, how do I change the positioning on that so that it doesn't still become something of just rugged only, right? And I want to celebrate the craftsmanship and the man in the machine or the man and the tools, rather than the fact that it's components of this weight, right? It can be of that weight, but it also is beautiful when it's done. And it doesn't exist, and it never has existed in North America. And I guess it's because we're a young culture in that respect, So, you look to Europe and it's very old. So they've gone through all these different generations and ideas of products and refinement, and we just haven't got there yet.
Yeah, I mean, you even see that in like the automotive industry and so many other industries.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you look at the European makers, even the Asian makers sometimes, and the
Mm-hmm.
level of engineering is just so much more fine-tuned than what we have
Oh
over.
yeah.
Part of that's by design because we have a different mentality in the West as far as like disposability and stuff, whether it's clothing or vehicles. But some of that is, as you said, we just haven't had enough time to really crack that open and make it more refined and really like.
Well, I think it's ultimately about education on product and education on localized manufacturing, and like you go back to what we were talking about earlier in the capitalist environment, and like the US has exploded with these massive companies, and none of them are doing it stateside. I mean, and so it doesn't grow the bottom line of the country if you're exporting all of that manufacturing and doing it somewhere else. I mean, it just doesn't, you're not going to have that there. I mean, Europe is, small pods of different countries, but within those, they still have some sort of support network. And in here, we don't. We just kind of, we saw that there was money to be made, and we went for it, So.
But now let's talk about the famous 2030.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
one, has this gotten old for you, or will it ever get old? And then two, what do you like about it? What do you maybe not care for?
So the only thing that I've really changed on the, well, the 2030, we've changed kind of the heel cup fit is a bit, we've made it a bit narrower to make it a better fit. We've changed the actual, like the last bottom, the footbed, we've narrowed it on the welt, because what happens is that if you take a straight up stitch down last and you just welt it, it's fucking huge. Like you, because the stitch down comes over and comes out with a flange and gets double stitched, it hides a lot of the ugliness of a last. And then when you go to welt it, you're like, yeah, this thing is just horrible. So in doing this, you're like, okay, it really makes you think about the product and also the process, because it's perception of how it looks on the foot. And with the 2030, it's got a sleek look when it is stitched down, because when it's stitched out, it takes a lot of the volume in the toe, so it looks a lot thinner than it is, right? And then when you make it welted, everything's tucked under and it's super tight. And so it's it's just always constantly looking at shapes and making sure that it looks somewhat representable of what I think it should look like. The only thing I've really changed is that. And then ultimately looking at the counter pocket on the service boot itself is ultimately the size of it, the ratio of how it balances out with at the bottom of the eyelet stay on the eyelets on the service boot, and then the height of the counter pocket curve, making sure that this ratio doesn't go too high. So if you look at a lot of people's product right now, and then maybe they're going to start changing their patterns now, but their eyelet stops here and their counter is way the fuck up here. So visually, when you set that thing down, it's like this, right? It's not balanced. And what you need is just a teeny bit like that. You don't need it to be like this. It looks like a pickup truck, right? It looks like a fucking hot rod. And you need it to be elegant. And to have elegance, you need it to be balanced like a car, front and back. If it's rear wheel drive, in a rear engine, it's gotta have this thing, right? And I'm constantly looking at the way that the pattern sits on the last with the heel height. And some of our heels, we have to use single ply leather heel base with the Ridgeways on a 2030. And how much of a heel lift do I have to put in there to allow it to balance out? And it's just constantly looking at this type of idea, like nonstop. And immediately I can walk by a rack of boots and I'm like, what the fuck's wrong with it? Like I can see it. I know what I'm looking at, because I'm the one that kind of had the vision to begin with, and a lot of people miss out on it. So, but that's, so the service boot iterations, I mean, I've changed it tons. I mean, constantly I'm tweaking it. I think the last time we changed it was like a year ago. And then, just trying to just make it better and trying to, it will complicate our own process and our own manufacturing. But ultimately I want to make it a better product to give the better value to the customer. And so, I'm trying to move away from like rugged, not the idea of ruggedness, but I don't want the only reason for somebody to buy our product is to be rugged, so I'm trying to change some of our systems and our processes to change the look, make it more refined, but then we still will produce it the same way. So I'm marrying more of an evolution of stuff rather than just keep pumping out these things that are what you have, which is great. It's fantastic. It's just, I think that there's room to improve, and in doing so, then there's a huge education of why we've done it this way. And obviously not everybody will want it that way, but I want to be able to at least get it to that point so that if somebody does want it, the option is there.
So let's segue there then. So your latest last, right, is the 2020. So in your mind, what need is that fulfilling? What kind of question is that last answering for you?
It's more anatomical. So it's based on two things. One, I created this last, I have it here. So I created this last, it's just full of Bondo, and then I had it made, and then I have a vintage orthopedic boomerang shoe, for the lack of better words. And I've taken these two ideas, and basically it's anatomical to the point of not being like the modified last, which is super contoured and it's curved. So it's got a very wide heel, a very tight instep, going through the arch of the foot, and then it's got generous in the ball, and it's very true to your foot. Whereas the 2030 is basically straight up almond toe, relatively balanced inside outside, and the waist and the everything through to the back is fairly straight, right? It's a very forgiving shape, but it also is not super snug. And so for me, as I develop newer lines, I'm trying to, we have the rugged market. We've been doing it for like 80 plus years. That's our heritage. And so how can I introduce new ideas and new fits that are not what we do? Also looking at, I'm working on a bunch of new lines now that are welted only, very, very tightly trimmed, totally different, because I want the DNA there, but I don't want the aesthetic to always look like our product. It can look like our product if you cut it in half, but it doesn't need to look like that from the outside.
So would you say that the 2020 is then like the brother of the 2030, and that this is like our modern take on the 2030, and the 2030 is more like the heritage take on the service boot?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the 2020 is it's a heritage idea because it's looking at anatomical. It's basically, if you take the 2040 or the 2045 last, they're very Munson. The 2045 is almost like a Munson last, right? It's very anatomical. And if you took that idea and you said, what does this clunky thing look like if we wanted to make that into a dress shoe? And ultimately, you're keeping the same DNA of understanding the foot and how the shapes and how it functions, but you're making it slim down and less chunky and more refined and elegant in the shape. And that's essentially kind of, I guess, how to describe it. And the 2030 is strictly like a military parade shape that is rugged but elegant, and it's timeless, and that's why it's the number one thing that we make. And I think a lot of older shoe companies have this last, like Alden, they got the True Balance, and and these key, they have tons of last, but ultimately it's probably only two that fills the entire factory. And so because it really works for everyone.
No, that makes sense. So if we were talking about jeans, it'd
Yeah.
be like, this might be the straight leg or maybe the slim straight. It's like, yeah, it's not gonna just really stand out there as something super special, right? As far as like, it's not a super, super skinny jean, and it's not like a super tube leg jean, but it's
Mm-hmm.
like what most of the population is gonna look at and be like, that's nice, right? Whereas maybe the 2020 is, well, maybe on one extreme end of the spectrum. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've worn one. I mean, for right now, that's pretty much all I wear is a 2020. Right now, I'm only really wearing our like derby shoes. That's it. I mean, it's summertime, but I don't like my ankles covered right now, and it feels like it's freedom, And maybe it's because I've been wearing boots for too long, and even in the winter, I'll still wear shoes, but yeah, it's just I like to put the shoe on, and it's snug and it fits, and it just fits every part of the foot.
Right.
And the 2030 just doesn't do that for me. It's a great shape. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's still not anatomical enough to have that kind of, when you put it on, it kind of just pops right in, that kind of feeling. But everybody doesn't want it. I mean, it's just like jeans, it's it's like people ask, well, how is it supposed to fit? It's like, well, I don't know how it's supposed to fit. How do you wear your jeans? Do you wear them too small or too big? I mean, or do you know exactly how it's supposed to fit? I mean, do you wear it on the hips or do you wear it below the hips? I mean, it's such a open-ended question, and a lot of the advice that people are looking for, they already know the answer to. They just need to change the perspective on the question that they're asking. And it's like, well, rather than trying to get confirmation from somebody else, it's just, well, what feels best to me,
Hmm.
And I feel like people just don't want to take that risk of assessment and say, oh yeah, this works. And then when somebody's like, dude, those are fucking hideous, then they don't want to be responsible, So yeah.
So weird question, because you mentioned like what you like to wear. So what's your foot width? Like, can you relate to all of us who are like, I'm a D width and I'm trying to wear 2030s and it's never perfect?
Uh, maybe like a D or a E, but I'll wear it regardless of. I mean, it's nothing that we have is super tight. So, um, I've, as of right now, I'm working on like 3 different widths of 2030 combination last, front and back, different widths to actually make it better. So I'm working on a bunch of stuff now, 2030, Chelsea, stuff that is quote unquote narrower than a 1035, but people that still want that look, but to fit, to fit their foot rather than just not being able to get it all together.
Hmm.
It's just stuff that I started working on this last year and just slowly kind of chip away at it and trying to find out a good balance of how to introduce it, how to actually fit this into what we're doing and not overly complicate. If we do custom order with retailers, I don't want to then add more options to the list to then have the chance of even more confusion in manufacturing. So I'm trying to just figure out how this all fits in. But I think especially like Chelsea boot, also looking at, we have like a whole cut zipper side zip boot, the Herald boot. That whole thing is made on the 2030, not on the Chelsea. So it actually is wider than the Chelsea. So that, there's going to be different widths in this and also go into service boots, there'll be different widths, etc. So the baseline, I think, would be the way that the 2030 now is an quote unquote E, but it's kind of, I guess it's straight in the middle. So I would go 1, maybe 2E, 3E down to a D. So I'm going to have a spectrum of widths, this type of thing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a good segue into my question about last. So this is going to take a little bit to set up, but yeah,
Sure.
bear with me. So one of
Yeah.
the things that's fascinating and intriguing about Viberg is your lasting philosophy it doesn't fit in the box, right? So most companies, whether they're 200 years old or 2 years old, most companies, they'll have 4 or 5 lasts, and then they kind of build all their boots and shoes off of that. And then some of those last or all of those last they'll offer in multiple widths.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys have chosen to do it, quote unquote, the hard way. You have like 17 lasts in your lifestyle fashion line.
I have no idea how
Yes,
many we got.
so and most of them are only in one width. So what's your reasoning behind that? Why would you do it the hard way? And help us better understand for anybody who perhaps is frustrated at that, why you chose it
It's
that way.
so the easiest answer, and I'll get into it, is just economically. When I started, I was constantly fighting to justify what I was doing. And even now, I have disagreements with my philosophy of what I'm trying to get made and why I'm trying to complicate the process and why am I doing a channeled insole when nobody else does it, And I'm constantly getting pushback uh, from my dad that is just like, we did welted in I'll go back to your question last, but we did welted in the 60s and 70s, and my grandpa had the channeling machines, and that's the way we did it. And I don't really care about the historical fact but I just know that when I started to get into doing welted, because ultimately when I first started to do what we're doing now, I did it all nailed down. I didn't do it stitched down because my idea was that the nailed down looks like welt. It's a lot tighter. People don't understand stitched down. In 2007, nobody knew what the fuck this thing was. It was weird because there's these 2 rows of stitching. What the fuck is it? It's not a welt. It's good, blah, 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 blah. And so it was this constant fight with people to educate way back then. And now people get it. And now, anyway, so yeah, anyways, I think I lost myself. But so talking about last. So because it was hard to justify what we're doing, and the idea is that this fashion idea at any point could disappear. So we don't want to invest into WIDs because we don't want to have excess inventory, right? So if you want to look at WIDs, you need to look at our 160 last, which is our industrial work boot last. We have like 5 WIDs, you know, double A, D, C, B, double E, single E, 4E, like fucking everything, you know, like, and that's our heritage. So the problem is that when you look at a shoe company like Trickers or whoever, Lob, any of these guys, they never made work boots. So if they made a work boot, they would have to decide either to buy 50 WIDs or just buy one and hopefully it works. So rather than us saying hopefully it works and then let's add more, we just said let's hopefully it works, and then it kind of works, but we don't ever actually add in more WIDs, right? So now it's just like a standard width. If you fit it, that's great. If you don't, well, that's great too. I'm sorry, but like that's just the way it is, you know. So that's ultimately the reasoning behind it. I mean, there's no logical process to it. It's just ultimately because we are industrial, and that's not we're not fashion first or casual product first. So that's basically what it comes down to.
Okay, so so maybe I'm giving you too much credit, but I had assumed that it was maybe an artistic thing, and it was like, oh, the 2030 on an E width gradation will have like the right balance proportion, but if you try to do it in the D or double E or whatever, then it just won't look right. So it's more of a practical reason, or is that part of it as well?
So I think the only way to make different widths is to actually make it in a combination, because if you take like a 4E front, it's not going to be 4E heel. It just doesn't work like that. 4E is probably a 2E, and a D is a C heel. Even though people don't know that, and most last are not named that, essentially that's what they're getting. I mean, they're not getting one lump straight through, because it's just that's not how the foot works. So I think when you look at the current 2030, you go, okay, it's an E front, and the heel is quite big still. It's quite chunky. So if you made it a D heel on the E front, essentially it's not even going to change much at all, right? Nobody's going to even know. It just, now it opens up the door to then scale out in either direction to different widths and actually have the balance that you're talking about.
Interesting. And so I was wondering as well, what do the names of the lasts mean? Are those numbers kind of like just arbitrary,
Nothing.
or is it like,
yeah, just nothing?
It's really cool.
It's yeah, there's no reason. I mean, as of right now, when we're developing something new, I'm trying to not necessarily a last, but at least the pattern. I'm trying to name everything and not just give it a generic name, like the service boot is just generic name that I came up with, which I wish I didn't. I wish it was a different name, because then it's a proprietary thing that we own. It's a thing, but you know, the pattern is the pattern. It's a generic pattern that dates back to the 30s. But you know, I think the more off that you can just have a name for all of your lasts or whatever, the better off you are. I mean, otherwise it's a number and it doesn't mean anything. I mean, I don't think anybody's really has a meaning to it. It's just, oh, well, we've named this before, so let's just add, you know, let's just go up by 5, and all of a sudden, you know, like we just recently renamed everything because it was all over the place. We had like 7-digit last numbers and shit, and it was just like, what the hell is this, you know? Just so we renamed everything and had to re-educate everybody that's stamping all of the boots and, you know, slowly trying to change all the lasts. And I mean, but it's just there's no meaning behind it. I would be surprised if people have, unless it's a certain year of the, you know, if I would have named the 2030, like the 2007 to, you know, celebrate the year that it came out with it, maybe, but I just don't see it, you know. There's too much work. We're just trying to make shoes, you know. So it's like, to actually put these thoughts together, it's not going to happen.
What are some Viberg firsts that are perhaps lost on the average person? For instance, so like recently you did a service boot that was shell cordovan and it was dry print, dry wear,
Yeah.
shell cordovan.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
a few people kind of got that, like Phil Callis over at Ashland Leather. He's like, oh wow, in the leather community, this is no one's ever done this. Like, no one's,
Yeah.
you know, so a few people get stuff like that, but things like
Yeah.
that are really lost on people. So what,
Yeah.
name a few of maybe your favorite innovations or things that you've tried that Viberg was essentially the first to do that are maybe lost on people in general.
Man, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of failures.
Yeah, I mean, that might be an easier way to word that. Like, how have you like tried to be creative and essentially failed?
Yeah, man, I don't know. It's I don't know. There's lots. I mean, that right there with the dry print. I mean, I have another print that I haven't used, and you know, we did like a floral printed slipper that was fucking amazing, but people just don't get it, you know. And right now, I've got like ultraviolet shell that is like, you know, I'm asking Horween just to give me all the weird shit that really nobody orders, and you know, and what am I allowed to do and what am I not allowed to do with shell, you know. And because people have a preconceived idea of what shell should be and what it shouldn't be. And, you know, it's one thing to make it backwards. It's one thing to then throw it in a tumbling machine and tumble the shit out of it. And so it's just, a lot of the stuff are failures, right? I mean, it's just, you know, we might, you know, if it's a pre-order, you might sell like 10 pair, you know, whereas if it's something else, you could sell like 50. But, you know, if you don't do it, it kind of feels redundant and you just keep making the same stuff. And, you know, it's, yeah, you know, but yeah, most people don't really get it, or they just, you know, they have their own idea and they don't want to be challenged on it. And with the internet, you're allowed to have a voice and be heard in ways that you could never have done before. And so you're seeing a lot more of opinions that, and, you know, either people agree or don't agree, and, you know, it's all valid, but, yeah, I mean, it's, you know, I don't really care. I just I do it. It doesn't bother me because it's just interesting, you know? So if, you know, if I sell one or I sell 100, it doesn't make a difference because I'm only making one for a pre-order. Or if it's something directly for Viberg.com, or it's through, say, a selected partner, we might only make 15. So if you sell 5, it's like, fuck, we sold 5, man. That's great. Like, we don't need to sell more than 5. So it's really, at that point, it's like it's a pet project, right? Yeah.
So you mentioned people's opinions. So
yeah.
One thing I'm curious about. So from what I see, there seems to be a disparity in what your goal in quality control is versus what many people feel that your goal in quality control is. And so an example would be this, stitch down rows, you know, they're always like, well, relatively straight. And, you know, as a side note, for anyone, you know, listening, I've actually measured your stitch down and the spacing between your rows and your SPI and the depth of this flange here. And it's actually a lot finer tolerance than most others use. So anyways, but you know, often you'll catch flack like, oh, they're not perfectly straight or whatever. You know, are you actually striving toward different idea of what quality is, as opposed to what people think? Or is it
You mean,
actually
are we letting shit through that shouldn't be coming through?
exactly, or is it that like, no, I actually was trying to get it straight. You
No,
can't cut
I
it.
mean, we have we're when it's not good, and there's just a line that there, you have the board, you have the line, not literally like the stitching lines, but you have lines, and like how far you can allow something to go out, and sometimes it goes out to the wrong person that already has 10 pair, and they've got 10 pair that are flawless. And so maybe the pair that they've got now, my guy that's stitching the sole, he only slept 2 hours, whatever. Like, I have no idea, right? It's just, it's the stitch down, the weight of the leather and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it, it's uh, it's it's very hard to get it perfect every time. It's just not going to happen. I mean, it's the way that the product is made. It's not meant for that weight of leather and that type of construction to be put under a microscope, right? If you had a question about Pacific Northwest logging companies and people that do stitch down. I mean, fuck, this stuff is meant to be just shit kicked. It's not meant to be put on a pedestal. So the transition of it is very, we're doing our best, but stuff does get through, but we also withhold a ton of shit. Um, the stitches per inch, it's something that is just preset. The work boots is a lot bigger stitch per inch. And then we tighten it up. And then with welt, it's even more tighter. It's just different. We're using different stitching machines and stuff like that. So, uh, you know, but that stuff I'm constantly looking at. I'm constantly trying to think of a way to make things even better and what other people don't do that are doing something similar to us, and looking at what I've got available and how can I improve on that. And so there's a lot of amazing dudes that are in Indonesia and China doing fucking phenomenal stitch down stuff, like mind blowing, but they're doing it one at a time. I mean, it's basically a bespoke shoe. So yeah, fuck, if it's not perfect and you're making it one at a time and you're probably hand sewing the sole on, I mean, fuck, you got issues. Like, your technique is not down because you're punching each hole individually. So you could probably pre-measure it out and then you punch it all. So yeah, it's going to be perfect. So, but with a machine, I mean, thread breaks, needle breaks. Is it done at 9 a.m. or is it done at 5 p.m.? When is it being done? Everything is going to be different. So, but yeah, in terms of what, we're not letting more shit through. I think. I mean, it's just trying to, we're trying to catch as much as we can, and also as we add new people into our production, it's really making people aware of if something is not up to standards, and then don't let it go through, it doesn't meet the QC. So but yeah, it's yeah, there's a very high expectation, put it that way, and it's just uh that's just the way it is. I mean,
Yeah.
there's nothing more to say. That's it's just the upper echelon of what people expect, and rightfully so. They're paying a fucking ton of money for the product, and so yeah, if it, I can't look at every single thing we make, but if I see something and it's no good, I'm like, fuck no. Like, this, it's like somebody's like, well, it could pass. I'm like, no, like, this is what people are paying for. They're like, I'm sorry, but it has to be remade. Like, it's just the way it is, right? So, and it's just something that hopefully we can get better and better doing. So it's just there always needs to be a dialogue with somebody that is directly involved with a customer or a store, that then has a conversation with manufacturing to then talk to finishing or whoever, so that the dialogue is there and there's an understanding of that we're not meeting expectation.
So if something gets kind of messed up on the line, do you have to throw it away, or does it go to the sample sale, or is it kind of a little bit of both?
uh yeah, I mean, if it's super crap, then we might just toss it. or if it's too much work to take it apart. It ultimately depends on how far along it is in the process, because if you've shredded the upper and and there's X amount of man hours already in it, and floor time in it, is it worth it to then recut it, or should you just toss it out, right? So we try to kind of save stuff. I mean, for the most part, it's with stitch down stuff that gets toasted, and it's a lot of work to like replace the vamp if the stitching's screwed. So you just kind of put it through as a flaw, and then you just make another one. So,
and then
the thing about like, so sole stitching on a welt, right? It's one row. If you fuck it up, you take the sole off, you strip the welt off, you can put a new welt on. Stitch down, you fuck it up. I mean, the holes are in the vamp. I mean, you're screwed. That's what you see, right? Unless you can relast it tighter and get rid of the excess holes. I mean, you got to put a whole new vamp on, which is a lot of work.
So is there anything that in theory you could sell at the sample sale or something like that, but you're just like, no, like I don't want this out there? Like someone could wear it. It's not atrocious, but it's not the style I want out there from Viberg or whatever.
Nah, I mean, I wish I could, but I don't. We just try to move it all. I mean, if it, you know, hopefully, if it's super flawed, people are buying it for like almost next to nothing. But at that point, what's the point? The problem is that the sample sale, if it's in person, I guess, so which obviously is not happening, but you ship the goods there, you fly people there, you rent the space, you set it up, and so if you end up selling something for like $100 or $200, I mean, you're not even making any money on it. It's not even covering, it's covering maybe some stuff, but I mean, material cost is, it's like probably close to $100 just the material. So you're not covering much.
So that's kind of like almost just like a service to the community then. The sample.
Well, kind of, but you're putting out just like a fucking ugly thing. I mean, it's at that point you'd be better off to just put it in a 40-foot container and just store the crap for like 50 years, and then somebody can open it like a time capsule. So
So okay, so speaking of time, so coming up here soon, we've got the year 2030, and
yeah,
got
2030. Yeah.
and we got the year 2031, which is your guys' 100-year anniversary. Do you have anything special brewing? Whether or not you want to share it, do you have any ideas for that?
No, not really. No. Hopefully we get there. Hopefully we're still in business.
Okay, so you're just like, no, I just need to make it one week at a time, and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that business is good. It's just, it's I think to have a milestone like that, and to reward yourself and the customer with this something special, you need to have uh, a very, it has to be executed in a way that is, direct to market, so that you're able to share that story directly firsthand, and not something. So, I mean, like, you either have a series of pop-up shops or something like this that gives you the full control, because if you do it through just third-party supply, third-party retail, it's not going to be the same thing. And it's just, it's great. It's a collectible thing, but it's not, the idea is not there. It's not about a journey, or, or you don't make it about a walkthrough experience for the customer. So, but yeah, I mean, I guess we will. I haven't really thought about it though.
The design process, like about how long would that take on average? Like from the time you just come up with an idea in your mind to the time it's like landing customer's doorstep in a blue Viberg box. What's the time frame?
I don't know. Could be a year. I mean, it doesn't take long to get the concrete bare bones thing out, like in terms of like in onto the floor, cut, sewed, and then it's just constantly refining something about it until it's good enough, and something that, if it's as simple as a last change or something, then it's easy. But if it's a new pattern, I've you know, we used to just do like trade show stuff, and I used to just use it as an art exhibition. I just used to make weird shit, and it was just an example of what we could do and what we're capable of doing. And now that, if I still do that, I then have to figure out, okay, well, how the hell do I actually make this thing, and what are the steps into finding those materials or trims or whatever that is. I mean, so it's a lot more time. It takes a lot more time to actually do it now than it used to, because it was less. We weren't as big. Our reach wasn't as big, and it was either directly for us or maybe for one store. And now, if I have an idea that actually somehow works, then you might have a whole bunch of people wanting it, and it's like, okay, well, I have enough to make 15, but I need to make 300. How the hell do we do that? And then it's like, okay, well, where do I find this material? And then, even though once I find it, it's like, okay, well, will it actually work when we put it into production? So it's a lot of trial and error. And so, but yeah, I would say probably at least a good year. I mean, the thing is, it kind of goes like with QC stuff. So if I have an idea and I have it somewhat dialed in, I can probably show it. But it's a lot easier to show it if it's 100% done or 100% to the capabilities of which we can do. It might not be 100% exactly what I need or wanted, but it's the best that we can do. It's different than if I just showed something that's conceptual, because a lot of people just don't understand something that's halfway through. So now that I don't do that as much as I did, it's on me to really make sure that this little fucker is dialed in completely before I take it to show somebody, because a lot of people just can't wrap their head around something that's not complete. They need to see it fully done. So, and then obviously taking it to market would be the exact same thing. You can't take something half-assed to market, because they're just not going to pay money for it.
Yeah, or even just like the little details, right? So like just using like black thread versus brown thread, or like white thread, then that could change the whole look, right? So
Oh yeah. I mean, it's like eyelets thread, your edging, it's it. I try to actually do more than that if I'm going to try to come up with something new, rather than just like, throw some fucking paint on it. It just is not enough for me. And yeah, it doesn't excite me. I want to challenge what we're doing in the factory, and I want people to work hard to get to the goal that I need. And it's luckily we have a really good team that can do what I want. So I'm very fortunate for that.
So let's jump into the nitty gritty of the boots a little bit. Boots and shoes.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll just go like piece by piece through some of the main things that I love. Okay, so one of the things that I love about your boots, there's a couple other companies out there, but mostly they're like Pacific Northwest boot companies like yourself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is like, I don't know. I think on one interview you said it was like 10 iron leather heel counter. It's like hard as a rock. You can't do anything. Like, yeah. So tell us about that a little bit.
Well, it's basically so right now we actually have two weights of counters. I don't know, like in fucking an iron, man. I'm trying to think. Maybe let's think in millimeters.
Okay.
It's probably like 3.5, 4 millimeter, maybe around that. It could be. So that's like industrial thick counter, and then we probably do like trying to do a bit lighter for, say, like Chelsea boot, not lighter weight, lighter thickness, but it's still rolled really, really firm. So it doesn't change the firmness of it. It's just, what it's doing is it allows you to last the shoe with thin leather. When, as the edges get feathered off on the counter, you can't see anything, and it allows you to see the shape of the last, right? So we probably go from like 2 to 2.5 millimeter all the way up to like 4.5 for work boots, where like that service boot, if it's unlined, the outside counter pocket houses the counter, so that you could use, the leather is probably like 6-ounce leather. So it doesn't matter how thick the counter is inside. It's already beefy, the shoe, right?
Mm.
So the advantage of leather counter is that as you sweat and as it gets warm, it's going to mold to your foot. If you use a thermoplastic or paper or leather board, it doesn't give you that ability. So.
And you guys are moving away from unstructured for the most part. Is that is for aesthetic reasons, or what made you feel like you wanted to do that?
No, I mean we still do it. I mean, it's just there's not much. Most of the stuff we're making right now is not unstructured, but and there's no reason for it. I mean, it's just the issue is that if it doesn't crease the way that somebody thinks it's supposed to crease, you're fucked because they want to return it. So like if it wrinkles up and it's like, what is this shit leather? It's like, well, no, it's unstructured. There's nothing in there. It's the lining and the friction of the lining and the vamp are moving. I mean, it's bound to happen, and it's just going to create the wrinkle. So, but we do it. I mean, it's not that we don't do it. It's just, it's slowly I'm trying to get into using all leather toe and everything. And so most of the stuff that's out on the site that's drop 3 for fall winter is all leather toe. And it's probably the samples that we made back in January were a bit thick. And then as we've progressed and slowly really tweaked out the thickness of the toe box and the feathered edges and stuff, it's fairly similar to what we have now. But it's a long process to add that in there, but it just makes it unique. The goal is to make like a leather ping pong, and so which will collapse. Like the ping pong is a thermoplastic that pretty much most people use some version of it, and it retains its structure until maybe it gets bent, and then it might just have a permanent crease on it. Whereas the leather, I mean, if it gets wet and you squish it, it's going to stay squished forever until you put the last in it or some sort of shoe tree to kind of give it its shape back, and it will reharden like a rock afterwards, like a counter.
Interesting. So let's like look at the 310 here. So like
Yeah,
these, I'm assuming, have a thermoplastic toe pod.
that I don't know. Yeah, it should be, or it could be what it could be is I'm trying to think. It could be what's on our industrial product. So it'd be a dipped toe that is fiberglass. It depends how hard it is. If it's rock hard, then it's the fiberglass, dipped fiberglass. If
Yeah.
it's a bit soft, then it's probably ping pong or
Okay.
thermoplastic.
Yeah, I think this is the ping pong. This is the Kentaurus makeup, Kentaurus in Germany, and it's a little soft. So no, I was curious
Yeah.
about that. So you do different ones for different 310s, is what you're saying?
Well, no, it should. I mean, in reality, it should be all the super hard one to keep the shape. It just depends. It just we don't make that many 310s. Like we're probably making, on a rock star year, you're probably making like a couple hundred pair. I mean, it's nothing. It kind of falls into this talk about a 145. It's like we probably sold the most 145s last year, and we probably only sold like 150 to 200 pair in custom makeups. And it's like, there's it's great, but it's taking up space where we can make something maybe better, or and if somebody else offers the same thing and they're not innovative and they're not trying to do what we're doing, then that's where somebody should go for that product and support that company, because they're not trying to move ahead. They're just satisfied with what they're producing and that kind of thing. So, I mean, nobody's really banged out a copy of the 310. Maybe somebody in China or something has, but I mean, it's just for no reason really. I mean, I have no idea, but it's not for everybody. I mean, it looks great with certain things, and you're like, fuck, dude, that it stands out, right? Automatically on the street, people are like, dude, what are you wearing? Those are so aggressive and so that you walk a certain way, and because it's sprung, it just kind of, you just kind of flow with it, you know? So yeah.
So what about the shanks that you guys use? I know you use metal shanks for a long time, and I've heard that you guys are moving away from that, at least in part. Is that true? And what direction are you taking it with the shanks that you use in your boots?
Yeah. So everything now, as of say January, has been just hardwood shank and everything except safety. So safety is stainless, stitched down safety shoe stainless, nailed down work boot or logging boot is always has always been wood for like ever for 80 years. So I just was trying to go back to wood shank because I wanted something all natural, and we were using a blend of like leather filler, high density foam, and then now we're just using cork. So we have sheet cork or liquid cork, um, just because, yeah, I just want it to be as natural as you can against your foot, and to actually mold to your foot. So and it's just a value proposition, and it doesn't complicate things too much in the process. It's just that we never had those uh, those materials available. So it's just sourcing to get the material integrated into the process, and eventually you can kind of get it through the line.
So I'm sorry, I might have missed it there. So do you use cork on, say, like a stitch down service boot, or are you more referring to your channeled welt?
Everything cork,
Okay,
everything that's non-industrial is cork.
okay.
Yeah. So it's either sheet cork that comes in a roll for a stitch down, or it's liquid cork, or and welt or anything. Yeah.
Okay,
Both are cork.
so you got like the midsole and then cork embedded in there somewhere, and then the outsole kind of deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me show you. Give me 1 second. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
totally.
All right. So um what do we put here? So this is basically a running shoe, right? But this has all been cork filled. So the outsole has a shank built in. So it's that. So that's basically the sheets of cork, which is like this. So we die cut it, put it through like a double-sided tape machine, stick it in, fill the whole bottom, and then on a stitch down, it's essentially just sticking underneath the shank, like something like this. 1 second, like this. So you have wood shank glued in, cork fill. Make sense?
Yeah, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't
And
realize
then,
any space in there between the midsole and the outsole.
yeah, but you're looking at like, 1.5 mil. It's very thin. And then say like on the welt, so like on the channel, right? Channel welt, you could do cork fill with sheet, or you could use liquid. And we use, depends if it's 360 welt, we'll use uh, liquid, or no, we'll use sheets because the sheet is thick. But on the 270 welt, like the breast to breast, we'll use liquid. So, and the reason is that when you do 360, it gives you like this massive hole that you can fill it with this big sheet, which essentially would look similar to this, right? It fills it nicely. So, yeah.
So I noticed on the factory tour that Division Road filmed fairly recently, you guys use a lot of machinery. Like a lot of it's by hand, but then every so often you'll see like a a machine that kind of lasts the heel portion here, or you'll see like a nail gun, as well as like hand nails. Like, does that, other than making it faster, does that improve like consistency or anything like that? Does that help?
Yeah. I mean, for the most part, I mean, if you go to a large shoe factory, like pretty much any of them that are doing say 200-300 pair a day, there's probably no hammers in the entire factory. They don't use them, right? Because it's probably welted, and so they would welt it. They welt the toe, and then they side staple it all together, and then it's basically done. And then they stitch the welt on it. They you don't need a hammer, right? There's no point. So when you nail in the heel here, like with this, it's just, yeah, it's basically a heel nailer, wipes it in, and just shoots the nails in. You could use a bed laster and do it by hand. We on a nailed down work boot, we do it on a bed laster. So it basically holds the shoe on the last like this, like with a peg, and the plate comes in, and you manually bring the wiper plate in, and then you cut notches into it, you set it down, you nail it, or whatever the process is. So we do a combination of kind of everything. But for efficiency, yeah, you would do machine. It's just it's expensive, you know. So I mean, like for example, you take like an inseam stitcher, the welt stitcher, the thing that stitches the welt on. You know, those machines in a normal factory can do like 800 pair a day. Like they just blast through it. And we're, you know, on a good day we're doing 40. Some days we don't do 40. So like these things don't even get used. So you could, if you had access to the labor, you could probably do it by hand. It's just, you know, it's going to be impossible. You'd have to be in a country that does, you know, Mexico or, you know, there's not many countries that do hand welted.
So it sounds like if you guys did just service boots or something like that, service boots and a few of your models that sell a lot, you could put out 2 times, 3 times, 4 times what you're doing.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Easy.
But you made the choice to, I mean, it is really quite fascinating. You've been there working for, you said like 13, 14 years, and you've got 17 lasts, and you've got, you've got, you know, jodhpurs and ropers and engineers and service boots and Munson, boondockers, So to do all that, you've decided that you're going to scale back production a little bit, sounds like, so that you can fit all that in.
Well, it's not to scale back. It's just we don't have the labor to do it, right? So it's you need like every department needs at least one ultra skilled person that then will complement 3 to 4 people around them, and we just don't have that right now. We did, and now we don't. So we have a lot of people that are all over the place. We're using them for key areas, and yeah. But ultimately, if you're trying to make, you know, if you're trying to make money, you're just going to mass produce stuff. I mean, you're going to do the iPhone, right? And then you get the $4 trillion valuation, and away you go. But it's yeah, it's not how I think. You know, it doesn't interest me to run the business like that.
So what are some other interesting materials that you guys might use? Like, I mean, the famous one would be the brass nails, but like, I know you put a lot of thought into even where you buy your laces, or like where you get your eyelets, or whatever. So what are some of the interesting components in a typical Viberg piece of footwear?
Yeah, so the insole, channeled insole stuff is all from Spain, all the insoles. We brass nails are from Congo, nail maker, really old nail maker in Japan, that doesn't usually make brass for footwear. They just use iron. I think they make for pretty much, you know, there's not many manufacturers making nails, and especially for footwear. So they're probably like one of a handful. And so they're doing all this custom stuff for us. So brass tacks, brass nails, brass staples, because we use staple for certain aspects of lasting, a mix of nail and staple. I've switched to veg lining leather, which is really fucking difficult to use, but we've kind of figured out some really good suppliers that will allow us to have veg tan lining that gives you enough oil and flexibility to not rip it. Mainly because I don't want something I'm trying to get away from super chrome tanned leather. I mean, I guess it could be white tanned as well. That would be fine. Yeah. What else? Ask me a few things and I can help you out.
Just like interesting things that you guys put in your boots. So like, your laces, like where do the laces come from? Eyelets, things like that. You know, anything that you get from some special.
Well, the laces are US, but I mean, even the US supplier is exporting, they're outsourcing part of the tanning process to Mexico now, everybody. And so main US makers of like these leather laces, it's US hide, tanned in Mexico. I think some people do it in China. They import the finished skin and they just cut it in the US, made in USA laces. I think the eyelets are USA, but actual origin, who knows? I mean, I don't know if people are actually making these things in there. Our shoe boxes are all done out of Chicago. Dust bags are done East Coast of the US. All of the internal components, all the printed materials local in Victoria. Um, yeah. What else? The thread is, I mean, I have no idea where the hell the thread is from. It could be Canadian or US or European. I don't know. I mean, it's like a large corporate supplier, but it's like, who knows, right? So, but yeah, I mean, it's trying to source as close to home as you can. um, the issue with, at least in Canada, is that if you try to source out, say, like a local made shoebox, your cost will be probably double of what it would be in the US, because there's less people, and most of these types of suppliers that are Canadian are probably on some sort of government contract to supply whatever, and so they're not, they're overcharging for what they're doing. So it's it's impossible to have a shoebox that costs you $12. You just can't, you can't factor that into your costs. I mean, it's a huge expense that comes out of the final cost of the boots, right? So if you put in shoebox, dust bags, creams, and all this kind of stuff, you're looking at like 15 to $25, depending on where it's from. North American made. If you get it done in China, you're still, it's still expensive. You're still looking at like, you probably $5 to $8, US. So it's not, I mean, it's cheaper. It's like half price, but the cost is still there, right? So, and the issue is that when you start to look at, how when somebody buys our product, there's a lot of stuff that goes with it. And then you look at somebody else's box and their contents, and it's a fucking embarrassment. So there's a lot of things that we're trying to do that may go unnoticed, that are, that we actually put in a lot of work doing, right? And so we could just use our craft paper work boot box and just ship it off, and a lot of people do that, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, when you hit a certain price point with a certain expectation, and then you look at, say, what the Italians do or the British guys do, it's like, it's not even, you can't compare it, right? So yeah, and really, so in that regard, the only person that's really left in North America to doing it on that level of presentation, product, finish, quality, blah 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 blah, is really Alden. I mean, they're doing a great job. Allen Edmond is a lower price point, but they're massive.
So you mentioned the brass. So why brass instead of iron for the nails, staples, tacks?
uh, well, it's non-corrosive, so if it gets wet, it won't rust. So if you were to take a really old pair of like engineer boots or something from like the 30s or the 40s, and if you take the sock liner out, there's going to be, more than likely, there's going to be massive holes around where the nails were, because they're corrosive and have rotted out the leather. And brass won't do that. It will oxidize and go green, but that's it.
Got it.
So that's the main difference. It's just a value that my grandpa thought was important. It's the cost is more. I mean, it's not like outrageously more, but it is, compared to iron, it's a lot more. And it's difficult to work with. It's soft, so if you don't hit it right with a hammer, it's going to bend. It's not like iron. You can just wallop it with a hammer and the thing will go in. So there's a bit of finesse that you need to have when working with the nails and with the hammer. So
So you mentioned your grandfather. You guys are a family company. So what does the family do? We hear a lot about you. We don't hear as much these days about Glenn, your father, or your brother Jason, or your mother.
yeah.
What do you guys all do there together at the factory?
So my mom is retired as of last year, and my dad is down to I think he's down to like 2 or 3 days a week, and he's always been doing finishing. So it's just heel trimming, fine sanding, edge trimming, and that's his like area of expertise for like 50 years. So it's a it's a complicated process to figure out how to divide those 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 tasks delegate them to the right people, and to train and all this kind of stuff. But it's fine. So, and my brother was with us up until maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and now he's off doing like medical stuff. But he was doing a lot of the industrial. He spent a lot of time in manufacturing. He was doing a lot of lasting for most of his career with us. He was on the floor doing lasting. So
Hmm. Who's on your like design marketing team? It's still you, guys still there? How's that?
yeah, guy is making an exit at some point, maybe in the next month or two. I have basically just me, and then Guy is here for now, and then he's going on to work with a I think it's a furniture brand, and that's basically it. We hired a new e-commerce coordinator. I have a new sales guy. I have a upper level like a like global strategist for sales that is helping develop out Japan, which we're doing, and got another consultant that's doing e-commerce stuff. And then I guess I'll have to hire some sort of assistant for me and slowly kind of rebuild. And it just I one of the things is, where we're at, especially with the e-commerce, to get us to the next level and to actually execute better and tell the right story with the right narrative and everything that complements it. We need some very not like huge like corporate dudes, but just people that have a lot of experience and understanding in what goes into that. So a lot of what we've been doing is very grassroots, and me and Guy, uh, just learning as we go, and at some point, it's can only get so big with your own knowledge and everything else. So we're kind of getting to that point, probably in the last year or two, just to start to figure out what that looks like to allow us to get to this next, get through the next 5 years and what that looks like. And if we can get permanent workers that people that are going to stick around for a long time that we can invest into, then we can actually grow the manufacturing out. It would be nice to get to 50 pair, 60 pair, uh, just because it allows us to actually get more product out in the market, um, take advantage of a lot of the business that's there. But to get to like double the size or double the staff, I think it would involve moving to a new facility and a whole bunch of other things that would make it quite complicated. So
So the work boot line, is that made in Victoria? Or is that like its whole separate thing, or how does that work?
yeah, so we offer a like made in Victoria, very traditionally made, like Whites or Wesco, safety login, this type of thing. You know, a version of what that is basically. I mean, it's all from the same, it's all from the same DNA. So and then we do some very small import line, which we haven't done much of, but we do it. But for the most part, everything is made here. So
And are those work boots kind of made to measure the way like Whites or Westco does sometimes, or are they more off the shelf like your lifestyle brand?
Yeah, I mean, we're phasing out the made to measure in a way so that it's just less work. And the problem is that the it's very, there's a lot of like work safety claim people that want specific stuff for one leg is shorter than the other, or they need very specific things for fittings and stuff like this that we've grandfathered in people that already have been doing it, but we're trying to not carry that forward just because it's such a small part of the business already, and it doesn't really, there's not hardly any profit into it, and to get to the point of being profitable, people just won't pay. So it's not worth it. It's the the city where we live, the average house price is like $1 million, and so your wage cost is quite high. So you can't you which then reflects the price of your product. And so we, because we've been here for 50 years in Victoria, we have a very strong community support for our safety shoes, but it's just at the end of the day, it's not very economical. So
So on that note, you mentioned Indonesian makers a little while ago, and there's some others around the world and stuff. Does that, I don't want to say worry you, but like what do you think of that? Like, not that they're just copying you or anything, because they've got their own ideas as well. But like, is that like any concern, or you're like, no, like it's all good, it's fair playing field, everyone's doing their thing.
yeah, I don't care. I mean, I think they're doing great stuff. I think that you know the way that I think and the way that I operate is unique to myself, and I have I have things in my factory that nobody else has for the most part, and so uh, you know somebody can't outsmart my idea because I'm doing my own thing. I'm not really worried about. I'm not looking to anybody to reference something. I might look at something vintage and say, oh, how did they do this so that I can apply it to what we're doing? But there's not really anybody that you know I guess, like I said from the beginning, is that when I first started doing this, there wasn't, this idea didn't really exist, so there's not another reference point for me to look at. So I think it's great that these people are doing it. I mean, the quality is fantastic. It's the worst thing going for them is the fact that it's made in so and so. I mean, that will be their hardest thing to sell or to get around, right? Uh, but their level of craftsmanship is phenomenal.
So where do you see Viber going in the future? I mean, you've kind of talked about that a little bit as far as like, what you like doing and stuff. But is there anything specific you could say about where you might want to take the company in the future?
Well, I think it's just really trying to maximize what I'm trying to do. I need to really have I need to categorize things better so that I can then educate on each category in the overall scheme of what Viberg is. And so right now it's too much of a mixed bag under one roof, I guess. I'm not talking in terms of changing the brand name. I'm just the approach to it to really maximize and take advantage of what I think we could be doing. Um, so uh, yeah, I mean it's as I get older and as my style, what doesn't change, but if it did change, uh, then I have ideas of what I would do. So that's ultimately, you know, I'm not making everything for me, put it that way. So
And are people looking for different things in the different places you sell? So like you have a big market in Asia, in Europe, and in North America. Is it like a totally different thing?
yeah. I mean, so right now we have a showroom now in Japan. I've set up a business there to go direct to market. I've got a person working with me. So we have a floor of a building in Tokyo. Um, we've been dormant there for like probably 6 to 8 years, and just no real business, random little projects, but nothing worth, you know, it's been probably like less than 5% of the business overall. I mean, it doesn't mean anything, but the importance of what it could be has made me keep the relationships and doors open. So the product that ultimately was selling there was a 145 and in this type of thing. And in Europe, it mainly was at the time, and still is ultimately like a 310, very rugged idea. And in North America, it's very driven by 310, and it's more looking at uh, utilitarian of a 2030 service boot type product that you can dress up, dress down, and ultimately the best market is the North American market, and it also is the most understood of the brand. And it's really looking at, you take Viberg overall, and it's like, oh, this is a industrial workwear company, and now we're doing this idea of like a fashion product or whatever you want to call it. But ultimately, what it is a modern day workwear, and modern day workwear meaning a guy that goes to the office, he goes to make coffee, or he works as a bartender. I mean, and what is that product for modern day workers? It's like, it's not blue collar rugged. It's just not that anymore. So it's commuting, it's this and that and this all kind of clumped up in one. And I think the 2030 really is adaptable to many different things in that environment, you know.
So what do you see happening in the niche footwear industry in general? Like aside from just who you guys are at Viberg, and then, next 5, 10, 20 years, not that you can predict the future, but like if you could guess, like what's happening, like where's it going?
I don't know. I mean, it's just I mean, there's a lot of makers, which is not new. It just seems like it's just a resurgence of new makers that kind of existed, say, back in the glory free and easy days. And now it's kind of on a resurgence again of like boot makers. Um, so, but I think it's just trend. I don't know if you can really predict it, or if you've invested highly into this area, then you're going to suffer when that trend moves away. Uh, and then you have like this sneaker thing, and it's just like, ultimately it's just, if the markets are going to be free and if they're allowed to produce in uh, duty free zones that do not allow for proper pay and everything else, and you have Nike and all these other huge companies taking full advantage of this stuff, all their money goes into marketing, and really the market for what we do traditionally is it's already shrunk, but I think it could maybe stay the same, but it's definitely not going to grow. I don't think. I just don't see how it could shift unless somebody sort of steps in and tries to break up a lot of these larger companies and larger trade agreements to sort of bring things back down to reality. Because it's just, you look at this TikTok shit and Facebook stuff, and it's it's the capitalist idea does not work, and it works obviously for the people that are making the money, and that's basically it. And so of those people, it's ultimately like running shoe type product, how that relates to us, I guess, right? So um, the easiest is just focus on what I have control of, which is product and the small market and very loyal following of people, and try to serve them the best we can, improve the service, improve the quality, and that's basically it. I mean, you know, to look ahead, you can kind of do that. I mean, but it's more just, what do I want to accomplish, and like, if I want to scale out and be huge, I will have to compromise a lot of things that I just don't really agree with. And, maybe I have to cross that bridge if and when I ever come to it. But for now, I just, we're not, the brand, I think, is bigger and more popular than the production. So, it's, it's, it's interesting because we're not trying to milk milk the brand and try to dilute the product to make more. It's just kind of trying to get a bit of a control on what we're doing so that we can be more influential or have more of a voice and share why it is that we're doing what we do. And yeah.
So before we hit our last question, and the last question is always, something special and a little bit more personal. Um, Tell us about the sneaker, the Viberg sneakers. I think, that's something that for many people it's like, wow, that's crazy looking. It's kind of odd. And what makes it different than just any other sneaker? Like, what's in the guts of it?
Well, sure. So the sneaker idea, the concept, essentially, we were doing stuff, I guess, let me think here. What London Olympics was what, 2011, 2012,
Something like
2012.
that. Yeah.
So end of 2010, all through 2011, we were doing stuff. This is before I had really had anybody working with me. We were doing stuff with Nike, trying to work on a bunch of developments. And we had all their original ACG stuff and some Air Force One. And we were working on something for London Olympics, like a made to order type of thing. And at the same time, they were doing stuff with Grenson was doing some stuff with them, because I was talking to Tim about this. And I think maybe a few other handmade manufacturers. And the idea was that you could just custom make a sneaker, like Hender Scheme, or like these guys that are doing it now, And so the stuff that we were doing a long time ago looks like what is popular now, except people made a business about making replicas of this type of thing. So the guy that was behind it was at Converse First Strings. He did a project with this guy named Sak, that is a Japanese guy out of Italy, and he was making handmade Converse that looked identical to like Hender Scheme and like Fight and all these guys. But this is back in like 2006, 2007, long time ago. And I remember when I was at a trade show in Berlin, and I saw them in the 14-ounce store in like this glass dome, and it was like 900 euros for this fucking handmade Converse, and it's just like a piece of art, right? So that kind of, anyways, fast track 4 or 5 years later, the guy that was behind that from Converse was now at Nike, and so anyways, that is kind of how it started, just the idea that it was possible, right? And then it really came down to what's a basic classic sneaker. I mean, it looks like a basic 70s trainer. I mean, there's nothing revolutionary about it. The leather and the insole and all that kind of stuff is very Viberg DNA, I guess. And then ultimately the sole of choice is just like a fat Vibram sole that was invented with Vibram and high tech for hiking, downhill hiking or something. Downhill running is what it is, but now it's a fashion product. And that's basically it in a nutshell, making something that kind of I had the idea for a long time. The real issue is like I said to you before, it's the execution of Viberg service boot to running shoe. You treat the running shoe like a service boot and it ultimately fails, right? Not saying that we could be selling thousands of them, but I think the idea behind it was not properly told and educated at the time of us doing it. So it's really, like I said to you before, it's really been putting the house back in order and trying to get the story across to allow the people that make stuff to give them the credit they deserve for all the work they put in to make these things that are super unique, and trying to tie up all of the loose ends, So from that, I started to do like a trail running shoe, which ultimately, well, I thought it's great. I mean, it's still kind of pretty much ready for production. I just kind of pulled the plug because of COVID and a bunch of other things. But it ultimately was more of looking at what is Viberg as a hiking what is that of athletic and what is in the middle, and how can I bridge those things together? What is that thing that would allow me to sell more of something casual of athletic, but also what makes it true to my DNA of being outdoor? So it was something in the middle, right? Trying to marriage those things together. And yeah, it's stuff that I was still working on. There was a high and a low version. I was going to make it waterproof. Uh, you know, then I got into doing stuff that was seam sealed with a booty. So I was doing. I wanted it to look like our iconic classic service boot stitch down, but you can't use a booty membrane with stitch down because you have to nail the heel, right? So then I decided to make it a 360 welt, but then I only I welted the whole thing, but then the way that I didn't welt the vamp. I only welted the lining to the vamp, which allowed me to then cut the vamp and stitch down it. So it looks like a stitch down. So it's basically like a Veldshone construction back in the day, which is welted stitch down, but with a membrane, so that it looks exactly like a Viberg. You wouldn't know the difference until you picked it up and you said, "Oh my God, there's a membrane in here," right?
So will that come out in the market ever, or is that kind of like, oh, that was
Yeah, it will. I mean, I was trying to get Gore-Tex, and and we're just like we're irrelevant to Gore-Tex, so it's you know, yeah. So it's really looking at like Sympatex, and I was going to Sympatec, and they do one that's fully biodegradable. There's no Teflon. Uh, Gore has got Teflon in it, and it doesn't break down. And Sympatex has invented their patent is with non-Teflon booty or membrane, and you can fully recycle it, and it will break down in landfill and all this kind of stuff. So the story there is a lot better. It just doesn't have the powerful name behind it. So yeah.
Yeah, and you get some other interesting like components. Like I don't know how old this is. The first time I've heard of it, and I'm not going to say this right, but you got the sole. It's like Lectia
Oh
Havia.
yeah, Lactahavia. Yeah. So it's just a latex sole, and I've been trying to work with these guys for a long time. It's a French company. They do latex made in France. They also have a factory in Vietnam, and it's just milk from the tree. They take the milk, they put it in a mold. The mold is actually like giant, and then they put it in water, and it slowly shrinks to size. Um, so also Vibram is the same thing. They do their Morflex. The blocker on the Morflex is like huge, and then when it comes out of the oven, and then it just slowly shrinks. Which is because I was in Italy and I went to their factory. It's pretty cool. Like it's interesting. So yeah, Lactahavia. It's a great product. It wears well. Somewhat difficult to work with, depending on if you've got the correct glues. We stick it directly to leather, which is obviously fairly complicated, just because it's not, you can't just use standard process and stuff like that. But yeah, it's nice. It's nice stuff. It's quite heavy though. That's the only issue.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I could talk shop for hours, but I know you
Yeah.
have a life.
Yeah.
So let's transition to the last question here. So Viberg is a family company, right? You've got the three generations, your grandfather, your father, and now you. And so I wanted the last question to be, when it comes to family legacy, even aside from footwear, but just for anybody, what do you think one of the most important things is for a man or woman to hand down to their children as a legacy or heritage?
I don't know, man. I don't know. It's tough to answer this because like we're not we're we're so small that we don't have the structures in place to do the things that would make it easy to have transitional uh structure of business, structure of shareholders, like very important things that I've had to integrate in the last you know 5 to 8 years of things that we didn't have. And as the company became, quote unquote, more valuable, then then we needed more structure and things like more layers to it. And, it has nothing really to do with legacy in the way that it's about craftsmanship. It's, I think that if you built the business around the founder, and the founder didn't themselves figure out a way to pass on the knowledge, I think there's nothing you can do to do that. There's not like there's a book. I was talking to Skip Horween about this, like this exact thing, because I was asking him about this stuff, and he told me, I guess it was probably in June, just during COVID, and it was they were trying to just basically float. I mean, people weren't ordering leather and blah 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 blah. So I was talking to him on the phone, and he said that one of the things that he didn't get to do with his dad was to sit down with him at the machines where he worked and just record him talking about the process and why, if he picks up a piece of leather, what is he actually thinking when he looks at that? What is that knowledge that unless you sit there and just let him free associate, you're never going to get that out of him, right? So I think it's something that eventually I will have to do with my dad, and have him working and just talking all day long about nothing. But there's going to be these nuggets in there that will explain his entire philosophy on when he picks it up, what is it that he's looking at, the trimming, and what does that feel like? Is he feeling for something at some point? He knows that it's done, and what is that? And but that's more about the craft, right? So it's just, I would say that it's a lot of the things about these small family businesses that we are so busy just trying to make product and do things to stay alive and just keep the lights on, or keep up with orders or whatever it is, or get orders, that you don't even think about the basic fundamentals of business structure, of how does it actually look when you pass it on to the next generation? Is there tax implications that are there? Like there's a million things that are going on. And once you get down that road, like it's, once you get into the legal field of all this stuff, and, if there's taxes to be owed, they're going to want to be paid, so.
Yeah. So I don't know how you would answer this question, but so it would seem that, Edwin was an individual who brought something to the table for the company that was very specific, true to who he is as a person in his personality.
Yeah.
And then Glenn brought a whole different aspect. And then you came along and you brought a whole nother aspect.
Yeah.
I feel like it's well-rounded at this point, or is this whole other aspect that needs to be explored that maybe another Viberg will come in and I'll leave their mark?
My grandpa was like original innovator, was innovator for function and for work, and he filled a need for the community to supply them with something. And because of that, and because of his understanding of quality, and that means longevity, he started to build a reputation, and so on, community to community. And then my dad came in and really looked at some localized markets and really tried to grow in logging and industrial, and got a CSA for certification. And then he started to look at, is there a way to maximize his knowledge with importing products and having a sub brand and this and that. And and then my involvement kind of came in as, I guess, probably at the right time, as the North American made industrial slowed down, and these other markets happened to open up at the right time, as with Westco and Whites, and everybody at this time in need, these opportunities kind of, the doors opened, and I kind of I saw what that was, and I kind of gave it my own creative idea and took it to other places. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's finished at all. I just think I wouldn't want to force somebody into this situation, knowing that if I look at how much my dad worked, and he's actually slowing down, and how much I am working, and how much I'm giving myself to growing this business, you wouldn't want to kind of force somebody into it. It's just, it needs to be a choice, and they need to know enough about themselves, and they need to figure out how they fit in and what they can offer. And ultimately, they're gonna, you have to earn it, through showing up, working hard, delivering on some deliverables that you're going to need, and sometimes when things are slow. Yeah, I mean, I have these conversations a fair amount. I mean, it's not a common thing for me to have with people, because there's not, there obviously there's a lot of family businesses. Some of them are service providers, some of them are manufacturing, but to have people that are directly related to what your industry is, it doesn't happen a lot. So I get to have these conversations with the Horweens a lot. Also, the people that own CF Stead. If we go to Milan, we're sitting down, and Horween is like sixth generation, and Steed is fifth generation, and we're third generation, and I'm trying to understand the dynamics of how it's set up, and always trying to ask questions and learn, because it's not something that is always available to you. And it's just interesting to see what other people are doing. And I was talking to Skip introduced me to Art, who owns Alden, and I've had a bunch of phone calls with him, and the same thing, just asking questions about the business, and not really about product, but just about other stuff that's relatable to me. It's you always have to be wanting to learn and to educate yourself, not only on product and process and what other people are doing. It's just also business and everything else. So on a product level, in my office, you got John Lobb stuff. You got vintage stuff. Some of it's taken apart, some of it's not. It's not looking. You're not looking to steal ideas. You're looking at how the hell they were able to do this, because the quality and stuff is just phenomenal. And it's like, is there something that, how can we, there's a level that you're trying to get to, and you'll never get there. But what are those steps if you wanted to get there? How do you implement those steps, right?
So it seems like a lot of you folks in the industry, it's a small industry, and you're pretty tight knit. Like, if God forbid, I don't want this to happen, but like if Horween just all of a sudden didn't exist tomorrow for one reason or another,
Yeah.
I mean, that would be catastrophic for like everybody, right?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, there's not many people left. So, if you go to Mexico and Leon, there's tons, they say the industry is dead, but I mean, you'd be shocked at how easy it is to get stuff. Like, literally, you can call up the tannery, and then you just drive, 10 minutes across town. And then you can go to the last maker, and then you can go get your soles, you can get the glue, you can get the welt, all in the same city. And it's the same thing in Italy. There's, it's all localized, and it is shrinking, but it's totally different than it is in North America. In England, there's not many left, but they still have this small community. I don't think many people are open and talking. I think it's a very closed idea, and I don't know if it's the older generation that doesn't want to have much crossover, or this idea of secretive knowledge, or whatever this is, right? But I mean, everybody's got their own set of lasts, and their own set of customers, and their own ideas, and not really, that's when you ask me about these shoemakers that do stuff similar, or even, people that are in North America doing stuff similar. And, you need them, because you need the community there. And so, we're so yeah, Horween, and there's not many other leather tanners. So it would be a huge, anybody that exits now, you're going to have a huge impact. It's going to, you now have to go across the water to get stuff, and your cost goes up, and your timelines go up, and a million other variables.
Well, thanks for explaining that. I think that was the big deal for me, anyways, with this interview is like getting a better understanding of what that narrative is, like what that story Viberg is trying to tell, which really starts with who you are, and your family. I think without understanding who you are and what you're trying to do, we're kind of gonna fail to understand, what's so special about Viberg. You hear all kinds of things out there on the internet about like, well, Viberg's the best because they're the best. Like their footwear is flawless, and it's like, well, I love it, but it isn't flawless. That's not why they're special. Or it's special because they were the first to do this or that or the other. And sometimes that's true, and sometimes it's like, well, no, like there's a lot of Pacific Northwest boot makers or whatever it is. So what I think is really special is that it's the narrative, it's the story, it's the mindset of pioneering and trailblazing and innovating, and what better way to understand that than to talk to you. So
yeah, I mean, it's at the end of the day, I can only be as innovative as my own manufacturing capability, which is still like, in the Stone Ages, but it's not Nike and it's not other stuff, but it's always trying to do something different, and most people will find something that is a hit, and that kind of is enough, so. But for me, it's great. The service boot's awesome. We can rely on it. The 2030 is great. We can rely on it. But what else is there? What else is possible?